Okay, so we're going to go straight into the question of the week, which is actually going to be the question of the coming weeks. As I mentioned, it's kind of a bigger question. I want to give it more time and really a lot of things going with that. And so the question of, remember, you can always ask your own questions at the question box in the back. But the question of the week is, what is hell like? So not really focusing too much on the reality of hell, but I think we are also going to look at different things about the reality of hell and what the Bible says about about hell. But specifically, we're going to have to focus on what is hell actually like. If you were to go there, what it's like. You know, do they have a beach? Do they have do they have a hotel? You know, what does it look like? Before we. For the part that we're going to look at tonight is we're going to start off with a little bit of a discussion. What are some misconceptions that you've heard about hell? Some things that people commonly believe that just aren't right. That it's like a hangout? Huzzah! You get to go to heaven where it's boring, or you get to go to hell with all your friends where it's a riot. Okay. Any other misconceptions? You actually hear that one quite a bit. That's not real. Yeah, you hear that one a lot. Yeah, I think that one's probably tied with the whole idea about it. You know, highway to hell, rock star. You know, any other common misconceptions about hell? Teresa, do what? Well, now that's not really a misconception. It's not really a misconception. We'll talk about that later. Okay. Any other misconceptions about hell? Are you going to raise your hand? Or? That you don't actually go to hell unless you did something really bad? Is that what you said? Okay. Right. So basically, people like us are going to be there, but Adolf Hitler's obviously not going to be there. Right. Okay. Terry? Okay, so basically, the misconception there would be that God doesn't send people to hell. Is that what you're saying? Okay, all right. So basically, questioning the love or the forgiveness or the goodness of God. Okay. Anything else? Okay, were you raising your hand? Okay. I want to mention a couple misconceptions that stand out to me. Great answers, everybody, by the way. A lot of those things are things we're going to be looking at in the coming weeks. But just 4 different misconceptions that you hear kind of a lot. The first is that hell is a tough situation. So basically, and this is real popular in media, like movies and stuff. Oh, this is hell. It's like, no, this is a rough situation is all this is. This is not hell. You're going through difficulty, and maybe you've had a lifetime of difficulties, but that is not the same as hell. The second misconception, and this is a misconception that's partially true, okay? So, hold on. Don't stone me until I've finished what I'm saying. The misconception is it is simply the absence of God. Okay? Yes. So, okay, let's break this down into pieces. I even wrote it down just to make sure I said what I'm trying to say here. In the sense that it is basically life on earth. It's the same thing as your life is on earth, but without God's presence. So it's like, oh, it's not that big of a deal because I don't really like God anyways. Well, that's not exactly what that means. So hell itself is terrible, and also God is absent. So hell isn't simply God's absence. It includes his absence. So it is terrible, but also God is absent. So you need to be real clear on that. Hell is not wherever God is absent. God is absent in hell. Okay, so just couple different ways there. Which brings us to a very important thing I want to mention before we get back to the misconceptions. God is omnipresent, which means he's everywhere present, right? So, hell itself is sustained in existence by God. The Bible says that all things that have come into being have been created through him, and he holds it all together. It says that in Colossians and John. It's very clear teaching. God is the one who is holding hell together. He created it, he held it together. So with that being said, how does that work with him being all present? Well, I hope that this explanation kind of gets what I'm trying to say across. It's not that God is not everywhere present. It's that he withdraws his goodness, or his, you could say his presence in the sense of his presence. You know, I don't know how to say this. He withdraws himself. I don't know how to get the idea across. But in hell, he withdraws that, even though he's present everywhere. Do you guys kind of get what I'm trying to say? Not really. Yes, in a way, yes, but also he would still have to be in the room, though. So it'd be like he was, it kind of like a nanny cam, but I mean, it that gets the image in your head, yeah. But so basically, in hell, you won't. Here's some ways to distinguish what this means. In hell, his goodness is going to be hidden from you. You know how you can just you can think about God's goodness and it can just touch you right there. Or in heaven, where you can literally gaze at his goodness and just be completely wrecked for forever, right? That's heaven. Well, in hell, you don't get that. There's a God-shaped hole in each of us on earth, and that will be filled in heaven. Well, in hell, it's impossible for it to be filled. God doesn't interact or intervene in hell with people. That kind of makes sense? So in the same sense as, here's a great example, perfect example of it, Genesis 1, Genesis 2. God, it says that God was walking in the garden with them, right? So where did he go when he left? Wasn't he still there? Well, yes, but he withdrew himself. So even though he was there, another example of this would be when his glory filled the temple, right? So was he not with them for the other times? Well, no, he was, but he impressed his presence on them. You know what I mean? We're trying to describe something that we don't experience. This is the exact same problem we have with the Trinity. How on earth do you describe the Trinity? Because we are not a triune being. We are a single being, right? All of us are single beings. So how do you get that across? Well, you really can't. It goes kind of beyond our capability of understanding. It's the exact same thing with hell. When we are present somewhere, I'm present there. We can't understand the possibility of being present but withdrawing my presence. You know what I mean? We don't get that. We can't do that. So it's one of those things where we can't get it because we can't do it and we can't comprehend it. So there's a lot more I could say, and I probably could have said that a lot less confusing. But my goal there is getting the ball rolling, not to finish the ball rolling. So we might come back to that in the future and describe it, and talk about it a little bit maybe in clearer ways. The third misconception I want to mention is actually one that is made popular in the book 23 Minutes in Hell. Has anybody read that book? 23 Minutes in? Okay, so you guys are familiar with the concept. Okay, well in that, if you'll remember, the demons are just sitting around persecuting people there. That's like all they're doing. You know, they got their whips or whatever. And the big problem with that is that demons do not throw people into hell. That's the first thing. The Bible makes it absolutely clear God is the gatekeeper. He's the one who's putting people in hell, not demons. They're not responsible. They're not the gatekeepers, okay? They're not like checking your membership cards. The second thing that I want to mention about this is hell was originally created for the angels who rebelled. The Bible describes it as a place that God has prepared for them. It wasn't intended for us. We weren't supposed to be there. So with that being said, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense that the demons would be sitting there whipping us when it wasn't even ever supposed to be for us. Demons aren't running things down there, nor do they have houses that they have tea in. They're not like sitting there all care for a spot of tea. That's not what they're doing down there. When the Bible talks about hell and demons being there, it's never in a good light, and it's never they're going back to where they came from, right? So how many times have you read in books or seen in movies, go back to hell from which you came? They didn't. They came from heaven. They rebelled. They were cast out. Hell is not a place where like they live and they belong there. It's foreign to them. It's not something that you kind of get what I'm saying. And then there is also the thing that it mentions that some demons are already in hell, already in chains, awaiting their judgment. Not all demons, obviously, but it says very specifically that there are some who are already there, awaiting their judgment. It says that in 1st or 2nd Peter, I don't remember which. But so there's just to kind of highlight this one. No, demons are not just sitting there persecuting people in hell. Hell itself is persecution. So we're good. Also, we'll come back to this at a later time, but remember in the book of Revelation that says that death and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. Hades would be the grave. So death and the grave were thrown into the lake of fire. So just to kind of get that. So the fourth misconception I want to mention is, and this one is extremely popular. It actually comes from Dante's Divine Comedy. Has anybody read that? Dante's Divine. It was written like the 1300s or something. No. Okay. Well, anyways, in that there are levels of hell, and this idea has actually gotten where it's very pervasive in our culture. It's very common to believe this. But the Bible actually never teaches levels of hell. What it does teach is a kind of intense concept, and I've broken it down into more manageable pieces. The first part of the puzzle. All sins equally separated us from God. Second piece of the puzzle. Not all sins are equal. Okay, now let's give you some examples before I go to the next piece of the puzzle. Jesus mentioned that there were some cities whose punishment was going to be worse. He even compares them with cities like Sodom and Gomorrah. If Sodom and Gomorrah had been given the same chance that you had been given, and he tells about the great judgment that's going to come on them over and above other judgment on other cities. And another example is those who mislead God's people. It would be better if a millstone were tied around their neck and they were cast into the sea. So these are all kind of extreme. He doesn't say that about all things. And obviously you could go through the law and point out how in the law not every single thing requires you to be put to death. So, I mean, obviously all throughout the Bible there's an idea that different sins require different kinds of punishments. So yes, there are various punishments. So now let's take to the third piece of the puzzle. So, okay, all sins equally separated from God. Not all sins are equal. Third piece of the puzzle, very important piece of the puzzle. In hell, there are different levels of punishment, but not separation by level. So, how does that look? Well, get the image in your head that you've seen on TV, I know you have, where somebody's going to hell and there's the demons whipping, and then you go deeper and deeper into the different levels. Like if you've seen the show Futurama, when Bender goes to robot hell, he goes through the different levels of hell. It's extremely common in media. Think of it more like a field where everybody is together, but some are getting it worse than other people. Okay, just because you got to hell, that isn't necessarily the bad news. There might be worse. There might be worse for you in hell than somebody else. And we could give lots of different examples for that, but I think that pretty well summarizes it. So those are the 4 misconceptions we're looking at tonight. But we are going to continue this conversation in the coming weeks. Were there any questions about anything that I said? We're all good? Okay. Starting next week, we're going to be looking at more at what is hell actually like. Like if you were to go on a leisurely stroll through hell, what would it be like? And then we'll kind of start looking at that.